Hey, still awake? Yeah, me too. It's one of those nights where your mind won't quiet down, right? Don't worry, I've got a few stories for you. 5, to be exact. Nothing too dark, just strange enough to take you somewhere else for a while. Let's see if they help. Story 1. I climbed stairs that led nowhere. Urban exploration has always been a hobby of mine. Something about abandoned buildings, forgotten spaces, places that time left behind. It calls to me. The decay, the silence, the feeling of discovering something most people will never see. I've explored hundreds of locations over the past 5 years. Factories, hospitals, schools, churches. All empty, all slowly being reclaimed by nature. My name is Adrian. I'm 29, and I document my explorations on YouTube. Nothing fancy, just me with a camera and a backpack, climbing through broken windows and walking through rooms that haven't seen visitors in decades. My channel has maybe 30,000 subscribers, people who appreciate the aesthetic of abandonment, who find beauty in rust and crumbling brick. I'd heard about the Ashford Apartments for months. Fellow urban explorers kept mentioning it in forums and comment sections. A 12-story apartment building in Detroit, abandoned since the 1980s, full of interesting architecture and reportedly untouched by vandals. The perfect location for a video. Finding it wasn't hard. The building stood on the east side of the city, a brick structure from the 1920s that had once been luxury housing. Art Deco details, ornate stonework, the kind of craftsmanship you don't see in modern construction. But decades of abandonment had taken their toll. Broken windows, graffiti on the lower floors, vegetation growing from cracks in the walls. I arrived on a Saturday afternoon in October. The sun was still high, giving me several hours of good light. I always explored during the day. Flashlights and nighttime added unnecessary risk, and the footage always looked better in natural light. The main entrance was boarded up, but I found an unsecured window on the ground floor. Standard entry for abandoned buildings. I climbed through carefully, mindful of broken glass, and found myself in what had once been a grand lobby. Marble floors, now cracked and stained. A chandelier hanging askew from the ceiling. Mail slots on one wall, empty and rusted. And in the center, a staircase, wide and elegant, sweeping up to the second floor with an ornate iron railing. I started my camera and began filming. Hey everyone, Adrian here. Welcome to the Ashford Apartments in Detroit. As you can see, this place is incredible. Look at that staircase, Art Deco perfection. Let's explore. I spent an hour on the first floor, documenting the lobby, the old mailboxes, the manager's office still full of paperwork from the 1980s. Everything I expected from a building this old. Decay and abandonment, but also beauty. The way afternoon light filtered through broken windows. The patterns of water damage on the walls. The stillness. When I'd filmed enough of the ground floor, I headed for the staircase. Tested the first step carefully. Old staircases could be unstable, but it held firm. The structure was solid. I climbed to the second floor. More apartments, all with doors hanging open or missing entirely. I explored several, finding remnants of former lives, furniture too heavy to move, children's toys, newspapers from decades ago, the usual artifacts of sudden abandonment. I filmed everything, narrating as I went, explaining architectural features and sharing what I knew about the building's history. Standard Urbex content. My subscribers loved this kind of thing. By the time I reached the 4th floor, I'd been in the building for almost 3 hours. The sun was starting to lower, the light taking on that golden late afternoon quality. I decided to push up a few more floors before wrapping up, maybe get some sunset shots from the upper floors. I climbed the staircase from the 4th to the 5th floor. The stairs here were identical to the lower floors, same wide steps, same iron railing, same architectural style. But something felt different. The air was cooler, the silence deeper, and the light seemed dimmer, even though it shouldn't be. I was higher up, closer to the broken windows. Should be getting more light, not less. I shook off the feeling and continued exploring the 5th floor. More apartments, more decay, nothing unusual. When I'd finished documenting that floor, I headed back to the staircase to continue up. That's when I noticed something odd. The staircase going up to the 6th floor looked different. Not dramatically so, but noticeably. The steps were slightly narrower, the railing was simpler, less ornate, and the landing at the top seemed further away than it should be. I checked my footage from the lower floors. Definitely different. Every staircase up to the 5th floor had been identical, but this one, leading to the 6th floor, had changed. Old buildings sometimes have inconsistencies, renovations done at different times, repairs that didn't match the original construction. I'd seen it before. Not concerning, just interesting. I climbed to the 6th floor. The stairs felt steeper than the previous flights, though when I counted the steps, there were the same number as before. 14 steps per flight, same as every other floor. The 6th floor was darker. That was the first thing I noticed. The windows here were almost completely boarded up, very little light getting through. I turned on my camera's light, the LED cutting through the dimness. The apartments here looked different too, smaller. The doors were narrower, the ceilings lower, like the building had compressed slightly as I climbed, but that was impossible. Buildings don't change dimensions floor by floor. They maintain the same footprint, the same structure. I explored a few apartments, feeling increasingly uneasy. Something about this floor felt wrong. The air was stale, almost thick, like the atmosphere had weight. And it was quiet. Not just quiet, silent. No sounds from outside, no wind, no distant traffic. Just my own breathing and footsteps. I decided to check out one more floor, then head back down. The light was fading, and I wanted to get out before dark. I climbed from the 6th to the 7th floor. These stairs were definitely steeper. I could feel the burn in my calves, the effort it took to climb, and the landing at the top seemed impossibly far away, like I was climbing twice as high as I should be. When I reached the 7th floor landing, I stopped and looked back down. The staircase stretched below me, further than it should. I'd climbed what felt like 2 or 3 floors, but I'd only gone up one. I checked the floor number painted on the wall. 7. I was on the 7th floor. But something about the perspective was wrong. The distance I'd climbed didn't match the height I should be at. I pulled out my phone to check the time, 5:47 p.m. I'd been in the building for over 4 hours, longer than planned, but not problematic yet. I still had daylight, except when I looked out through a broken window, the sun seemed lower than it should be. Much lower. Almost setting, when it should have been mid-afternoon, based on when I'd entered. My phone's clock must be wrong, or I'd lost track of time. Easy to do when you're focused on filming. I decided to head back down. I'd gotten good footage, and the weird perspective of the staircases was making me uncomfortable. Time to wrap up. I walked back to the staircase and started descending, but after one flight, I found myself on another landing. The floor number read 7. I was still on the 7th floor, but I'd just gone down a full flight of stairs. That should have taken me to the 6th floor. I tried again, counted the steps carefully. 14 steps, 1 landing. The floor number read 7. I tried a third time, same result. No matter how many stairs I descended, I stayed on the 7th floor. Okay, don't panic. Old buildings are confusing. Maybe I'd gotten turned around, was climbing up instead of down without realizing it. The stairs all looked the same, easy to lose your sense of direction. I looked for windows, trying to orient myself by the outside view. But the windows on this landing showed only darkness. No city lights, no streets, no sky. Just black, like the windows opened onto nothing. I went back to the landing and tried going up instead of down. Maybe if I climbed higher, I could find a different staircase, a different route down. 1 flight up. The floor number read 8. Good. Progress. The 8th floor was even smaller than the 7th, the hallways narrower, the ceiling so low I had to duck, and the silence was oppressive now, pressing against my eardrums like I was underwater. I found the staircase and climbed to the 9th floor. The stairs here were very steep, almost like a ladder. I had to pull myself up using the railing. The 9th floor was barely recognizable as an apartment building anymore. The hallways were tunnels, the apartment doors so small I'd have to crawl through them. The walls were closer together, the ceiling just inches above my head, and the floor slanted, tilted at an angle that made walking difficult. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. Buildings don't compress like this. Architecture doesn't work like this. I tried my phone, no signal. Not surprising in an abandoned building, but I'd had at least one bar on the lower floors. Now nothing. I checked my camera. Still recording. Battery at 60%. At least I had that. At least I was documenting this, whatever this was. I had to find a way down. Had to get back to the ground floor, back to that window I'd climbed through. The stairs weren't working, so maybe there was another way. Fire escapes, maybe, or... I found a window on the 9th floor and looked out. Darkness. Complete darkness, like the building was floating in void. No ground below, no sky above, no city lights in any direction. Just endless black. That's when I started to panic. Really panic. Because I understood now that something was very wrong. I wasn't just lost in a building. I was lost in something that looked like a building but followed different rules. Rules I didn't understand. I ran back to the staircase, tried going down again, counted every step. 14 steps. Landing. Floor number 9. Up. 14 steps. Landing. Floor number 10. The 10th floor was worse. The ceiling so low I couldn't stand up straight. The hallways so narrow I had to turn sideways to fit. The apartment doors were miniature, like dollhouse doors. And the silence had become a presence, something that watched and waited. I was crying now, not ashamed to admit it. I was trapped in an impossible space, a building that had become a trap, stairs that led nowhere and everywhere at once. I tried breaking a window, thinking maybe I could climb out, despite the darkness. But the glass wouldn't break. I hit it with my flashlight, with pieces of debris, with my own fists. Nothing. The glass was impervious. Or maybe it wasn't glass at all. Maybe it was something that just looked like glass. I kept climbing. What else could I do? Going down didn't work. Staying put didn't work. So I climbed. Maybe if I reached the top, if I found the roof, there would be a way out. A fire escape ladder, an access hatch, something. 11th floor, 12th floor, 13th floor. Each level smaller than the last, more compressed, more wrong. By the 14th floor, the ceiling was pressing against my head, the walls touching my shoulders. I was crawling now, pulling myself through spaces barely large enough to fit. 15th floor, 16th, 17th. I'd gone past 12 floors now, past where the building should end. But there were more stairs, always more stairs. Always another landing with another number. My camera died on the 18th floor. Battery drained somehow, even though it should have had hours left. I was in darkness now except for my phone's light, and that was dimming too, draining impossibly fast. 19th floor, 20th, 21st. The stairs were vertical now, more ladder than staircase. The landings were just platforms barely large enough to turn around on. The floor numbers were scratched into the wall like someone had carved them with their fingernails. I didn't want to think about who that someone might be. Didn't want to consider that I might not be the first person to get trapped in this impossible building. 25th floor, 30th, 35th. I lost count. The numbers on the walls stopped making sense, showed digits in wrong orders, symbols that weren't numbers at all. My phone died on what might have been the 40th floor, or the 100th floor, or the 10,000th floor. Distance and height had lost all meaning. I was just climbing, pulling myself up step after step, landing after landing into darkness that never ended. I don't know how long I climbed. Hours, days. Time didn't work right in the stairwell. My body should have given out, should have collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration. But I kept climbing, like the stairs wouldn't let me stop, like the building needed me to keep ascending, to keep searching for a top that didn't exist. Eventually, I couldn't climb anymore. I stopped on a landing, no idea what floor, the numbers were just meaningless scratches now, and sat down. Gave up. If I was going to die in an impossible stairwell, at least I'd die resting. I closed my eyes, waited for whatever came next. Thirst, starvation, madness. Whatever ended people who got trapped in spaces that shouldn't exist. But I didn't die. I opened my eyes and found myself looking at something different. Not a landing, not more stairs. A door. A simple wooden door, painted green, with a brass handle. It looked completely out of place in the compressed, wrong geometry of the upper floors. It looked normal, real, like a door from the world I'd left behind. I tried the handle. It turned. The door opened. On the other side was the lobby, the same lobby I'd entered through hours, days ago. Marble floors, hanging chandelier, mail slots on the wall, and late afternoon sun streaming through the broken windows. I stumbled through the door, fell onto the marble floor, looked back. The door I'd come through was gone. Just a wall where it had been, solid and unbroken. I crawled to the window I'd entered through, pulled myself up and out, tumbled onto the ground outside. Real ground, real air, real world. I lay on the weedy pavement, staring up at the Ashford Apartments, 12 stories of brick and broken windows. Normal, ordinary, an abandoned building like any other. But I knew the truth. Knew what was inside. Knew about the stairs that went up forever, that led nowhere and everywhere, that trapped anyone foolish enough to climb too high. I stopped doing urban exploration after that, deleted my YouTube channel, threw away my camera. I couldn't risk entering another abandoned building, couldn't risk finding more stairs that didn't follow normal rules. I tried to warn people about the Ashford Apartments, posted on forums, left comments on other explorers' videos, tried to tell them about the stairs that led nowhere. Most people thought I was joking, making up a creepypasta, trying to scare others away from a prime location. A few people believed me, stayed away from the Ashford, but others went anyway, drawn by my warnings like a challenge. Most of them came out fine, explored the lower floors, got their footage, left without incident. But some didn't come out. 3 people over the past 2 years have disappeared in the Ashford Apartments. Went in during daylight, never came back out. Their cars found in the parking lot. Their equipment discovered on the lower floors, but no sign of the explorers themselves. I know where they are. They're in the stairs, climbing forever, searching for a top floor that doesn't exist, trapped in a space that grows larger the higher you climb. Maybe they're still climbing now. Maybe they'll climb forever. Maybe the building keeps them alive somehow, needs them to keep ascending, to keep feeding its impossible geometry. I tried to get the building condemned, called the city, explained the dangers, begged them to tear it down or at least seal it properly. They said they'd look into it, but the building still stands, still open to anyone willing to climb through a broken window. Still waiting. I think about those 3 missing explorers sometimes. Wonder if they ever found a green door, a way back to the lobby. Or if they're still climbing, their legs moving mechanically, their minds long since broken by the impossibility of what they're experiencing. I think about how I made it out, why the door appeared for me when it did. Was it luck? Did I climb far enough to satisfy whatever the building wanted? Or did I just happen to find the exit at the right moment, in the right way? I don't know. I'll never know, and I'm not going back to find out. If you do urban exploration, If you explore abandoned buildings and forgotten places, please be careful. Check staircases before you climb them. Notice if they start feeling different, if the geometry seems wrong, if distances don't match what they should. And if you ever find stairs that feel steeper than they look, that seem to go on longer than they should, that make you feel like you're climbing in circles even though you're going up, turn back immediately. Don't try to push on. Don't try to reach the top. There is no top. There's just more stairs, more landings, more impossible distance between you and any way out. The Ashford Apartments has stairs that lead nowhere, or more accurately, stairs that lead somewhere no one should go. A space that grows the higher you climb. A trap disguised as architecture. I climbed those stairs, climbed for what felt like forever, and I barely made it out. Others haven't been so lucky. Others are still climbing, still searching, still trapped in a stairwell that should only go to the 12th floor, but instead goes on infinitely, endlessly, impossibly. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't assume that because a building looks abandoned, it's safe. Don't assume that stairs are just stairs, that they follow the normal rules of physics and space. Some buildings have stairs that lead nowhere, and once you start climbing them, once you go too high, you might never find your way back down. I climbed stairs that led nowhere, and I was lucky to find the door that led back to somewhere. But the door doesn't appear for everyone, and the stairs are always there, always waiting, always ready to trap the next person foolish enough to climb too high in a building that stopped following normal rules a long time ago. The Ashford Apartments stands in Detroit, 12 stories from the outside, but inside, on the stairs, it's infinitely tall, infinitely deep. A trap that looks like architecture, a space that grows to consume anyone who enters. I got out, but others didn't, and won't, because the stairs lead nowhere, everywhere, forever. And once you're on them, once you've climbed too far, there's no guarantee you'll ever find the way back down. I climbed stairs that led nowhere, and they almost led me nowhere permanent. Into a space between spaces, a height without ceiling, a climb without end. Please, if you explore abandoned buildings, if you love the decay and the silence and the forgotten places, be careful. Watch the stairs. Notice when they start changing, and turn back while you still can, because some stairs don't go anywhere you want to be. And the Ashford Apartments has the worst stairs of all. Stairs that lead nowhere, everywhere, forever. And I'll never forget the feeling of climbing them, higher and higher, knowing with increasing certainty that there was no top floor, no end, no way out except luck and a green door that appeared when I'd given up all hope. The stairs led nowhere, and I'm lucky that nowhere eventually led back to somewhere, but I wouldn't count on that luck twice, and neither should you. Story 2. My photograph changed overnight. Photography has been my passion for as long as I can remember. Something about capturing a moment, freezing time, preserving something that will never exist in quite the same way again. It's always fascinated me. I've been a professional photographer for 6 years now, mostly doing portraits and events, building up a decent portfolio and a steady client base. My name is Ethan, I'm 31, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. My apartment doubles as my studio, one bedroom for living, the other converted into workspace with backdrops and lighting equipment. My portfolio hangs on the walls throughout the apartment, my best work from over the years. Weddings, portraits, landscapes, moments captured and preserved. Last month, I was hired to photograph an estate sale. Not my usual work, but the pay was good, and I'd been wanting to branch out into more commercial photography. The estate was the Thornhill House, a Victorian mansion on the outskirts of Charleston that had been in the same family for over a century. The last owner, Margaret Thornhill, had died at 93 with no living relatives. Everything was being sold off. I arrived on a Saturday morning to document the items before the sale opened to the public. The house was incredible. Original fixtures, antique furniture, walls covered in old family photographs. the kind of place that felt frozen in time, like stepping back into the 1920s. The estate sale coordinator, a woman named Patricia, showed me around. We need photos of everything for the catalog, the furniture, the art, the collectibles. There are some particularly valuable items in the study that need detailed shots. I spent the morning photographing furniture, china sets, vintage clothing. Everything was in remarkable condition, carefully preserved by generations of Thornhills. Around noon, Patricia brought me to the study. "These are the important pieces," she said, gesturing to the items arranged on a massive oak desk. "Antique cameras, some dating back to the 1880s, very collectible. And this?" She pointed to a photograph in an ornate silver frame. "This is supposedly the oldest photograph in the collection. Taken in 1847, daguerreotype process, worth quite a bit." I approached the photograph. It showed a woman, maybe 30 years old, standing in front of a house. This house, I realized, recognizing the distinctive facade. She wore a dark dress, typical of the period, and stared directly at the camera with an intense, unsmiling expression, the way people did in old photographs when exposure times required them to remain perfectly still. But something about her gaze was unsettling. The way her eyes seemed to look through the camera, through time, directly at the viewer. I'd seen hundreds of old photographs. This one felt different, wrong somehow. "Who is she?" I asked. "Lillian Thornhill, the original owner of the house. Built it in 1845, lived here until her death in 1902. Family legend says she was obsessed with photography, one of the earliest adopters of the daguerreotype process. This was her first portrait." I photographed the daguerreotype carefully, along with all the other items in the study. By late afternoon, I'd documented everything. Patricia paid me in cash and asked when she could expect the digital files. "I'll have them edited and ready by Monday," I told her. "I'll email you a link to download." That night, I uploaded the photos to my computer and began sorting through them. Hundreds of images of furniture and collectibles. When I reached the photo of Lillian Thornhill's daguerreotype, I stopped. Something was different. In my photograph of the photograph, Lillian's position had changed slightly. Not dramatically, just a few degrees. Like she'd shifted her weight or turned her head a fraction. Her eyes seemed to be looking at something off to the side instead of directly at the camera. I checked the original photo on my camera's display. Same thing. Lillian was definitely in a slightly different position than I remembered. I was being paranoid. I'd only looked at the daguerreotype for a few seconds when photographing it. Memory is fallible. I was probably misremembering her exact pose. I edited the photos and sent them to Patricia on Monday as promised. She responded with thanks and said everything looked perfect. I should have deleted the files after that. Should have cleared them from my computer and moved on to the next job. But I didn't. I'd been fascinated by that daguerreotype, by the quality of the image, by the way it had been preserved for over 170 years. I kept one copy on my computer in a folder with other reference images I'd collected over the years. A week later, I was working on editing a wedding shoot when I decided to take a break. Scrolled through some of my reference folders, looking at composition and lighting techniques from other photographers. Came across the file of Lillian Thornhill's daguerreotype and nearly fell out of my chair. Lillian had moved, not slightly, dramatically. She was no longer standing in front of the house. She was at the side of the house, maybe 15 feet from her original position, still looking at the camera, but from a completely different location. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't misremembering. This wasn't a trick of perception. The photograph had changed. The woman in it had moved to a different place. I checked the file properties. Last modified, the day I'd taken the photo. No one had edited it. It was the original file, untouched. And yet the content had changed. I called Patricia. "The daguerreotype of Lillian Thornhill, do you still have it?" "The estate sale was last weekend. Everything sold. Why? Who bought it? I need to see it again. I'm not supposed to give out buyer information, but she paused. Is something wrong? I just need to verify something about the photograph I took. It's important. She sighed. A collector from Atlanta bought it, paid $3,000. I have her contact information if you want to reach out. I got the buyer's number and called immediately. A woman answered, introduced herself as Margaret Chen, said yes, she'd bought the daguerreotype. I'm the photographer who documented the estate, I explained. I have a strange question. Could you describe the photograph? Where is the woman standing? She's standing in front of a house. Why? Is she centered in the frame or off to one side? Centered, standing right in front of the main entrance. Is there a problem? In front of the entrance. Centered. That's where she'd been when I photographed it. That's where she should be. But in my digital file, she was at the side of the house. The photograph had changed, but the physical daguerreotype hadn't. No problem, I said. Just verifying some details. Thank you. I hung up and stared at my computer screen. This didn't make sense. Digital files don't change on their own. Photographs are static. That's the entire point. They capture a moment and preserve it exactly, unless this photograph was different. Unless whatever I'd captured was somehow alive, somehow able to move within the digital space. I should have deleted the file then, should have cleared it from my computer, emptied the trash, scrubbed it from existence. But I was curious, morbidly fascinated. I wanted to see what would happen next. I checked the photograph every day. For the first week, Lillian stayed at the side of the house. Same position, same angle. Then, on day 8, she'd moved again. She was closer now, much closer, standing maybe 5 feet from where the camera would have been, where the photographer would have been standing in 1847. Her expression had changed too. The neutral, composed look was gone. Now she was smiling, a small, knowing smile that made my skin crawl. I started taking screenshots, documenting the changes, building a timeline of her movement. Every few days, she'd shift position, always moving closer to the camera, always moving forward, toward the viewer, toward me. By week 3, she was close enough that her face filled most of the frame. I could see details I hadn't noticed before, the texture of her dress, the style of her hair, the intensity in her eyes. And that smile. It was wider now, showing teeth, an expression that was somewhere between amusement and hunger. I tried everything to get rid of the file, deleted it. It reappeared in my downloads folder, reformatted my hard drive. It was there when I reinstalled my operating system, sitting in a folder labeled Important Documents. Destroyed the hard drive completely and bought a new computer. The file was on the new machine the first time I turned it on, as if it had transferred itself. The photograph wanted to stay, and Lillian wanted to keep moving closer. I stopped sleeping well. Every night I'd dream about the photograph, about Lillian walking through the frame, stepping out of 1847 and into the present, about her standing in my apartment, that knowing smile on her face, asking why I'd disturbed her rest. On week 4, her face was so close it was distorted by the camera's depth of field. I could see individual pores in her skin, the fine lines around her eyes, and her hands had appeared at the edges of the frame, reaching forward, fingers extended like she was trying to touch the lens, or trying to reach through it. I called Margaret Chen again. The daguerreotype, has it changed at all? Changed. How would it change? It's a photograph. Please, just look at it. Tell me if the woman's position is different. I heard her moving, footsteps across the floor. I'm looking at it now. She's exactly where she was, standing in front of the house. Nothing has changed. You're sure? Positive. Why are you asking? What's going on? Nothing. Thank you. I hung up before she could ask more questions. The physical photograph was stable, unchanged, but my digital copy, my copy that should have been an exact reproduction, was alive somehow, evolving, and Lillian was getting closer to escaping it. I started researching Lillian Thornhill, found census records, property deeds, a brief obituary from 1902. Most of it was standard historical information, but I also found something else, a newspaper article from 1849. Local woman arrested for witchcraft. The article described how Lillian Thornhill had been accused by neighbors of practicing dark arts and communing with forces beyond the mortal veil. The charges were eventually dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the article noted that several people who testified against her had died under mysterious circumstances in the years following the trial. Another article from 1895 mentioned that Lillian had become a recluse, rarely leaving her house, and was known to conduct strange experiments with photographic processes and chemical compounds. A third article, her obituary from 1902. Lillian Thornhill, 85, found deceased in her home. Death attributed to natural causes, though the body was in an unusual state of preservation. No funeral services held at the deceased's request, buried on family property. I kept digging, found a journal entry from one of her neighbors, preserved in a local historical society archive. The entry, dated 1898, read, "Saw LT through her window tonight, working with her photographic equipment. She appears not to have aged in 20 years. What dark bargain has she made? What price will she pay?" Lillian Thornhill hadn't just been interested in photography. She'd been obsessed with it, with capturing images, with preserving moments, with, if the rumors were true, using photographic processes for something beyond simple documentation. And now, 120 years after her death, she was still active, still present, trapped in her own first portrait, trying to escape. On week 5, the photograph showed only her face, pressed against the inside of the frame like she was pressing against glass. Her smile was gone. Now her mouth was open, like she was screaming or trying to speak. Her hands were flat against the frame, fingers splayed, and her eyes looked directly at me, not at where a camera would be, at me, following me as I moved around my apartment, tracking my position like a portrait in a haunted house. I couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. Couldn't be in the same room as my computer, knowing that photograph was on it, knowing Lillian was in there, getting closer to breaking through. I moved in with my girlfriend, Emma, who lived across town. Told her my apartment had a gas leak, needed to stay away while it was fixed. I didn't mention the photograph. Didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane, but I couldn't stop checking. Every day, I'd log into my computer remotely from Emma's place, open that file, see how much closer Lillian had gotten. Week 6. Her face was distorted now, pressed so hard against the frame that her features were flattened. Her hands were curled into fists, pounding against the inside of the photograph like she was trapped in a box. Week 7. Cracks appeared in the image, not in the file, in the photograph itself, like the frame was breaking, like glass was shattering from the inside. And through those cracks, I could see something else. Movement, shadows, a space behind the photograph that shouldn't exist. Week 8. The frame was mostly broken now. Lillian's hands reached through the cracks, grasping at nothing, or grasping at something I couldn't see, trying to pull herself out, to escape the prison of her own first portrait. I knew I had to do something. Knew I couldn't just keep watching, keep waiting for her to break through completely. But what could I do? The file couldn't be deleted. The image couldn't be destroyed. Lillian had bound herself to it somehow, made herself permanent, impossible to erase. Then I remembered something from my research. Lillian had been buried on her family property, on the grounds of Thornhill House. What if that was the answer? What if I needed to go to her grave, to the place where her physical body rested, and somehow break the connection? I drove to Thornhill House. The new owners, a young couple who'd bought it after the estate sale, let me onto the property when I explained I was doing historical research. They pointed me to the old family cemetery at the back of the property, said I was welcome to look around. The cemetery was small, maybe 20 graves. I found Lillian's easily, a simple stone marker with her name and dates, 1817 to 1902. The grass around it was overgrown, the stone weathered by a century of elements. I knelt by the grave and pulled out my phone, opened the photograph. Lillian was almost completely through now, her upper body visible outside the frame, her hands gripping the edges, pulling herself forward. Her face was turned toward me, that smile back, triumphant. "I know what you want," I said to the photograph. To Lillian, "You want out. You've been trapped for 175 years in your own image. But I can't let you out. Whatever you've become, whatever you did to yourself, it needs to stay buried." The image flickered. Lillian's expression changed. The smile disappeared, replaced by rage. She pulled harder at the frame, her body contorting as she tried to force her way through. I did the only thing I could think of. I held the phone over her grave and began deleting everything. Not just the photograph, everything. All my files, all my photos, all my backups. I factory reset the phone, wiped it completely, destroying years of work and thousands of images, including the photograph of Lillian Thornhill. As the final files deleted, I felt something change. The air around me grew cold. The ground beneath my knees trembled slightly, and I heard, faintly, a sound like glass shattering, or like a scream, cut short. Then silence. The grave was still. The air was normal. The trembling stopped. I waited for an hour, sitting by that grave, making sure it was over. Nothing happened. No sounds, no signs, no indication that Lillian was still trying to escape. I went home that evening and bought a new phone, set up a new computer with a fresh operating system, started rebuilding my photo library from cloud backups. The photograph of Lillian's daguerreotype was gone, completely erased. I'd lost some other files too, collateral damage in the mass deletion, but I didn't care. Lillian Thornhill was back in her grave, where she belonged, trapped in death the way she'd tried to escape by trapping herself in her photograph. That was 3 months ago. I've been cautious about photography since then, very cautious. I don't photograph antiques anymore, don't take pictures of old portraits or historical items, and I'm extremely careful about what I keep on my devices, because I learned something important. Photographs aren't always static. They aren't always just captured moments, preserved and unchanging. Sometimes, if the conditions are right, if someone wanted desperately enough to be preserved, if they used methods we don't understand, if they bound themselves to their image in ways that transcend normal photography, sometimes the photograph can become a prison, or a doorway, or both. Lillian Thornhill bound herself to her first portrait, made herself permanent, indestructible, eternal, but she didn't realize she'd be trapped, that being preserved in a photograph means being frozen, static, unable to move or change or grow. She'd spent 175 years in that image, slowly going mad, slowly learning how to manipulate the digital copies, how to move within the frame, how to reach toward escape. I don't know what would have happened if she'd succeeded, if she'd broken through completely, emerged from the photograph into the present day. Would she have been physical? A ghost? Something else entirely? I don't want to know, and I made sure I'll never find out, but sometimes, late at night, I think about all the other old photographs out there, all the daguerreotypes and tintypes and early portraits from the 1800s. How many of them might contain people who did what Lillian did, who bound themselves to their images, seeking immortality, not realizing they'd be creating their own prisons? How many of those photographs are in museums right now, in archives, in private collections? How many are being digitized, converted to files that can be copied and shared and spread across the internet. And how many of those people are trapped inside, slowly learning how to move within their frames, slowly reaching toward escape? I don't photograph old portraits anymore, don't keep images of antiques that might contain trapped souls, and I check my devices regularly, looking for files I don't recognize, images I didn't take, photographs that might be changing when I'm not looking, because my photograph changed overnight, and I learned that some images are more than just light and shadow captured on silver plate or digital sensor. Some images are prisons, some images are doorways, and some images contain people who never really died, just transformed, trapped, waiting for someone to give them the chance to escape. If you're a photographer, if you work with old images, if you collect antique photographs, be careful. Look closely at what you're capturing. Notice if anything seems off, if positions change slightly between viewings, if expressions shift in ways they shouldn't. And if you ever find a photograph that changes, if a person moves within the frame, if they get closer to the camera, if they start reaching toward you, don't keep it. Don't try to document it. Don't hold on to it thinking you can control or contain it. Destroy it completely. Delete every copy, wipe every drive, erase every backup, and if you can, find where the person in the photograph is buried. Go to their grave and make sure they stay there. Because some people don't want to stay dead. Some people found ways to preserve themselves, to trap their consciousness in images, to exist beyond their physical death. And those people are still out there, still trapped, still desperately trying to escape. Lillian Thornhill is back in her grave. But there are others, other old photographs, other trapped souls, other images that change overnight when no one's watching. And every time someone digitizes an old photograph, every time someone copies and shares a historical image, they might be helping one of those souls get closer to escape. My photograph changed overnight, and I barely stopped Lillian from breaking through. But others might not be so lucky. Others might not recognize the signs until it's too late, until the person in the photograph has pulled themselves completely out, emerged into a world that's moved on without them, become something that exists between life and death, between image and reality. So be careful, pay attention, and if a photograph changes overnight, if the person in it moves, if they reach toward you, if they start to smile, don't wait, don't watch, don't try to understand. Just destroy it before they escape, before they break free from their silver plate prison and become something the modern world was never meant to encounter. My photograph changed overnight, and I learned that some images are alive in ways we're not meant to understand, in ways that make the boundary between past and present, between dead and living, between captured and escaped, thinner than we ever imagined. Lillian Thornhill wanted immortality. She got it. But immortality as a photograph, trapped and frozen and desperate to escape, isn't the gift she thought it would be. And somewhere, in museums and archives and private collections around the world, others who made the same choice are waiting, trapped in their own first portraits, slowly learning how to move, slowly reaching toward the frame, slowly trying to escape. My photograph changed overnight. Yours might too. And if it does, you'll understand why I destroyed everything rather than let Lillian Thornhill escape her own image. Some photographs should never have been taken. Some people should never have been preserved. And some images should stay exactly as they were, frozen, static, unchanged, no matter how desperately the person inside wants to break free. Story 3, Static That Spoke My Name. I've always been a night owl. Something about the quiet hours after midnight just feels right to me. The world asleep, the streets empty, just me and whatever I'm working on. As a freelance graphic designer, I can set my own hours, and I'd always preferred working late and sleeping until noon. My name is Nina, I'm 30, and I live alone in a converted loft in Portland, Oregon. The building used to be a warehouse in the industrial district, and my unit still has some of that raw aesthetic, exposed brick, high ceilings, large windows overlooking the river. It's quiet at night, which I appreciate. Just the occasional sound of trains in the distance or ships on the water. I'd been living there for about 6 months when I started hearing the static. At first, I thought it was interference from a neighbor's radio or TV bleeding through the thin walls. Just white noise, that fuzzy sound of no signal. It would happen around 2 or 3 a.m., lasting maybe 5 or 10 minutes before fading away. Annoying, but not worth complaining about. I just put on headphones and kept working. But after a few weeks, I started noticing something strange. The static wasn't random noise. There were patterns in it, rhythms, almost like speech, but too distorted to make out actual words. I tried to ignore it, but once I'd noticed the pattern, I couldn't unhear it. Every night when the static started, I'd find myself listening, trying to decipher what it was saying, if it was saying anything at all. One night in late September, the static came earlier than usual, around 1 a.m., just as I was getting into a design flow. I pulled off my headphones, annoyed at the interruption, ready to go knock on a neighbor's door and ask them to turn it down. That's when I heard it clearly for the first time. Through the static, buried in the noise, a voice, speaking one word. Nina. My name. The static had said my name. I stood frozen, listening. The static continued, that wash of white noise filling my loft. I walked toward the sound, trying to locate its source. It wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from my desk, from my laptop speakers. But my laptop was muted. I'd turned off the sound hours ago so I could listen to music on my phone instead. The volume icon showed 0, muted, no sound should be playing. And yet, the static poured from the speakers. And through it, that voice again. Nina, can you hear me? I slammed the laptop closed. The static stopped immediately. I stood there in my loft, heart racing, the silence suddenly oppressive. I opened the laptop again. The screen came back to life, showing my design project exactly as I'd left it. No audio programs running, no browser tabs with streaming content, nothing that would explain the static or the voice. I checked the system settings. Audio output was set to my headphones, not the laptop speakers. Even if something were playing, it shouldn't have come through the built-in speakers. But I'd heard it. I was certain I'd heard it. Static and a voice within it, speaking my name. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd imagined the voice. Maybe the static had been real, some kind of electrical interference. But my tired brain had hallucinated the words. I'd been working for hours, was probably exhausted, seeing patterns where none existed. I decided to call it a night. Closed the laptop, turned off the lights, went to bed. But I couldn't sleep. Kept listening for the static, for that voice. The loft was silent except for the usual ambient sounds, the building settling, distant traffic, water in the pipes. Nothing unusual, just my imagination running wild. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m. When I woke up at noon, everything seemed normal. Daylight made the whole experience feel ridiculous. Of course, there hadn't been a voice in the static. Of course, my laptop hadn't been talking to me, just exhaustion and an overactive imagination. But that night, when I sat down to work, I was nervous. Kept glancing at the laptop speakers, waiting for the static to start. It didn't. I worked until 2 a.m. without any unusual sounds. I was starting to relax when my phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. Can you hear me now? I stared at the message. Who was this? A wrong number? A prank? I didn't respond, just set the phone face down and tried to ignore it. 5 minutes later, another text. Same number. Nina, I know you can hear me. I've been trying to reach you. My hands were shaking. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came immediately. Someone who needs your help. Someone who's been trying to communicate for a very long time. How do you know my name? I know everything about you, Nina. I've been watching, listening, trying to break through the static. I should have blocked the number, should have called the police. This was clearly harassment, someone with too much information about me being creepy. But something made me keep responding. What do you want? I want you to listen. Really listen. Tonight at 3 a.m., turn on your radio. FM 89.1. Just listen. Then nothing. No more texts. I waited, but the unknown number went silent. I looked up. FM 89.1. It was a dead frequency in Portland. No station assigned to it. Just empty bandwidth, static, nothing. I should have ignored the message. Should have deleted it and gone on with my life. But I was curious, and maybe a little scared. Whoever this was had my number, knew my name, knew enough about me to be genuinely threatening. At 3 a.m., I turned on my old transistor radio. I'd bought it at a thrift store years ago, liked having it around for emergencies. I tuned it to 89.1. Static, pure white noise, no signal, exactly what I'd expected. I was about to turn it off when the static shifted. The noise organized itself into something else, and through it, clear as day, that same voice from my laptop. Thank you for listening, Nina. I've been trying to reach you for so long. Who are you? I asked aloud, feeling ridiculous talking to a radio. It's hard to explain. I'm someone who got lost, between signals, between frequencies. I've been trapped in the static for I don't know how long. Time doesn't work the same way here. This isn't possible. This is a prank. Someone hacked my devices. This isn't a hack, the voice interrupted. This is real. I'm real. Or at least, I used to be. Now I'm just noise, signal without source, a voice in the static, trying to be heard. I should have turned off the radio, should have thrown it out the window. But the voice sounded so desperate, so human. If this was a prank, it was an elaborate one. What do you want from me? I asked. I need you to find me, find my body, find what's left of me in the real world. I've been broadcasting for years, trying to reach someone, anyone who could hear me. You're the first person who's listened. Your body? Are you saying you're dead? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. I remember there was an accident. I was working late at a radio station. There was a storm, lightning, something went wrong with the equipment. And then I was here, in the static, in every frequency, every signal, every transmission, trapped in the electromagnetic spectrum, trying to find my way back. My rational mind was screaming that this was impossible, but I'd heard too much, seen too much to dismiss it completely. The static on my laptop, the texts from an unknown number, and now this voice coming through a dead frequency, telling an impossible story. What's your name? I asked. Marcus Chen. I worked at KPNW, the public radio station. That was, God, I don't even know how many years ago. Everything blurs together in here. I pulled out my phone and searched for Marcus Chen and KPNW. Found an article from 15 years ago. Radio technician missing after station fire. The article described how Marcus Chen, 28, had been working the overnight shift when an electrical fire broke out. His car was still in the parking lot, but he was never found. Presumed dead, though no body was recovered. I found an article, I said. From 2008. You disappeared during a fire at the station. 15 years, the voice said quietly. I've been lost in the static for 15 years, trying to reach someone, trying to be heard, and you're the first person who's listened long enough to understand. What do you want me to do? Come to the station. The old KPNW building. It's abandoned now, but I think part of me is still there. And the equipment, and the transmitters, and the wiring. If you can find it, maybe I can finally be free. Maybe I can stop being just noise. This is insane, I said. I'm talking to a radio about finding a dead man's body in an abandoned building. This isn't real. Please, the voice said, and the desperation was palpable even through the static. 15 years I've been screaming into the void. 15 years of being everywhere and nowhere, trapped in transmissions, bleeding through signals, trying to make myself heard. You're my only chance. Please. I should have said no. Should have turned off the radio and blocked that phone number and moved on with my life. But something about the voice, about the story, about the sheer impossibility of it all, I couldn't let it go. Where's the station? I asked. The voice gave me an address in North Portland. I looked it up, an industrial area near the railroad tracks, mostly warehouses and manufacturing buildings. The old KPNW building was still standing, marked on Google Maps, but listed as permanently closed. When should I come? Tonight, as soon as you can. I'm stronger at night when there are fewer signals competing for bandwidth. During the day, I get drowned out by all the other transmissions, but at night, I can concentrate. I can guide you. Against every instinct of self-preservation I had, I agreed. Grabbed my jacket, my phone, a flashlight. The radio I left on, tuned to 89.1 so the voice could continue speaking. Thank you, Marcus said as I headed for the door. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. The drive to North Portland took 20 minutes. The area was dark, industrial, mostly deserted at 3:30 a.m. The old KPNW building was easy to spot, a squat two-story structure with boarded-up windows and a faded sign. A chain-link fence surrounded it, but the gate was open, the lock long since broken. I parked on the street and approached the building with my flashlight. The front door was secured, but I found a side entrance that had been pried open, probably by homeless people or urban explorers. Inside, the building was a mess. Water damage, graffiti, trash scattered across the floor. But I could still see evidence of its former purpose. Cables running along the walls, equipment racks in the back rooms, a studio space with a shattered window looking into a control room. My phone buzzed, a text from the unknown number. Upstairs, the transmitter room. I found the stairs and climbed to the second floor. The transmitter room was at the end of a hallway, door hanging open. Inside was a space full of old broadcasting equipment, transmitters, amplifiers, racks of electronics all covered in dust and decay. And in the center of the room, something that made my blood run cold. A chair, knocked over. Scorch marks on the floor and walls, and in the corner, barely visible in the beam of my flashlight, a skeleton. Slumped against the wall, wearing the remains of what looked like a work uniform. One hand still reaching toward a transmitter panel, as if trying to turn something off or on. The skull was charred, the bones darkened by fire. This was Marcus Chen, or what was left of him. My phone buzzed again. You found me. I looked at the skeleton, at the transmitter equipment, at the scorch marks. What happened to you? Lightning hit the antenna during the storm. Surge came through the equipment while I was working on it, electrocuted me. But something went wrong. Instead of just dying, I got absorbed. My consciousness, my voice, everything that made me me. It got transferred into the electrical system, into the signals. I became part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And you've been trapped there ever since. Broadcasting, trying to be heard, bleeding through static and white noise and dead frequencies, hoping someone would notice. Most people just hear noise. But you listened. You heard the pattern. I looked at the body, at the transmitter, trying to understand. What do you need me to do? In my pocket. There should be a USB drive. I was backing up the station's files when the surge hit. If you can retrieve it, if you can get it out of here, maybe that's enough. Maybe if something of my work, my life, exists in the real world again, I can finally let go. stop broadcasting, find peace. I approached the skeleton, trying not to think about what I was doing. Reached into what was left of the uniform pocket, found a small USB drive, corroded but intact. The moment I touched it, every piece of equipment in the room came to life. Lights flickering, speakers crackling, displays showing random numbers and letters. And through it all, Marcus's voice, everywhere at once. Thank you. Thank you. I can feel it. The connection. After 15 years, something of mine is back in the physical world. Something real. Something that exists outside the static. The equipment was going haywire now, sparking and smoking. I backed toward the door, the USB drive clutched in my hand. I can let go now, Marcus's voice said, quieter now, fading. I can stop broadcasting. Thank you for listening, Nina. Thank you for believing. Thank you for setting me free. The equipment went dark, all of it, simultaneously. The building went silent. No more static, no more voice, no more electromagnetic presence. Just me, standing in an abandoned transmitter room, holding a USB drive from a dead man, finally able to rest. I called the police from my car, told them I'd been urban exploring and found human remains. They asked me to wait, sent officers and eventually a medical examiner. I didn't mention the voice, the static, the texts. Just said I'd been curious about the abandoned building and found the body. They identified the remains as Marcus Chen within a few days. The family was notified. After 15 years of uncertainty, they finally had closure. A funeral was held. Marcus was properly buried. The USB drive I kept, plugged it into my laptop at home, curious about what was on it. Found audio files, recordings of Marcus's radio shows, personal notes, photos of friends and family, a digital snapshot of his life before the accident. I sent copies to his family. They were grateful, said it helped them remember him as he was, not just as the person who disappeared. But I kept the original drive. Because sometimes, late at night, when I'm working in my loft, I still hear the static. Just for a moment. Just a brief wash of white noise. And through it, faintly, I hear a voice. Not speaking my name anymore, not asking for help, just saying one word, over and over. Free. I don't know if Marcus is truly at peace. I don't know if consciousness can really be trapped in electromagnetic signals or if I experienced something else entirely. But I know what I heard. I know what I found. And I know that sometimes, when technology fails and static fills the spaces between channels, there might be something more than noise. There might be voices, people lost between frequencies, consciousness without bodies, trying desperately to be heard. And most of us just tune past them, dismiss them as interference, never stopping to listen long enough to understand. I listen now. When the static comes, I pay attention. Listen for patterns, for rhythms, for anything that might be someone trying to communicate. I haven't heard anyone else yet. Just Marcus occasionally. That single word confirming he's finally found peace. But I know now that the static isn't empty. It's full of possibilities. Full of voices we're not equipped to hear, signals we're not meant to receive. And somewhere in all that noise, people might be trapped, waiting for someone to listen. Waiting for someone to believe, waiting for someone to help them find their way home. The USB drive sits on my desk now, a reminder that technology connects us in ways we don't fully understand. That consciousness might be more than just neurons and synapses. That death might not be the end, just a different frequency. I don't work as late anymore. Don't spend as much time alone in the quiet hours. Because now I know what's in the silence, what hides in the spaces between signals, what whispers through the static when no one's listening. Marcus found his way out because I listened, because I took the time to hear past the noise and understand what he was saying. But how many others are trapped? How many voices are broadcasting right now? on dead frequencies and unused bandwidths, trying desperately to reach someone, anyone. I think about that sometimes. Think about all the static I've ignored over the years, all the white noise I've dismissed as interference. How many of those moments might have been someone trying to communicate? How many lost souls are out there, trapped in the electromagnetic spectrum, waiting for someone to hear them? I can't save them all. Can't listen to every frequency, decode every pattern, investigate every source of static. But I can be more aware, can pay attention when something feels off, when the noise seems too organized, when the interference sounds almost like speech. And maybe, if I'm lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, I'll hear another voice, another Marcus, trapped and desperate and hoping for rescue. I don't know if I want to. Don't know if I can handle more experiences like that, more trips to abandoned buildings to find bodies that have been lost for years, more conversations with the dead, mediated through static and white noise. But I know I'll listen, because now that I know it's possible, now that I understand what might be hiding in the interference, I can't unhear it, can't ignore the patterns, can't dismiss the static as just noise. Someone spoke my name through the static, and in listening, in believing, in helping, I changed everything. I gave Marcus Chen his freedom. I gave his family closure. I proved that the impossible might not be so impossible after all. The static still comes sometimes, late at night when I'm working, when the world is quiet. It comes through my laptop speakers, my phone, my radio, just white noise, just interference. But I listen, always listen, because somewhere in that noise, there might be a voice, a person, a consciousness trapped between frequencies, trying to find their way home. And if they speak my name again, if they ask for help again, I'll answer, I'll listen. I'll do whatever I can to set them free. Because that's what the static taught me, that we're never truly alone, that consciousness might persist in ways we can't imagine, that death might not be the end, just a different kind of signal. Static that spoke my name, and in speaking it, changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the spaces between. I listen now. I always listen. And in the quiet hours, in the dead frequencies, in the noise that fills the spaces between channels, I sometimes hear them. The voices in the static, the lost ones, the trapped ones, the ones who need someone to believe. And I believe. I'll always believe. Because Marcus Chen taught me that some noise isn't noise at all. It's people trying to be heard. And all they need is someone willing to listen. Story 4. The building that emptied too fast. Working late at the office used to be normal for me. As an accountant at a mid-sized firm, tax season meant long hours, endless spreadsheets, and a lot of takeout dinners eaten at my desk. I didn't mind it. The building was quiet after 6 p.m., easier to focus, and the overtime pay was good. My name is Rachel, I'm 32, and I work at Morrison & Associates, a financial services firm in downtown Minneapolis. Our office takes up the entire 14th floor of the Palmer Building, a 20-story glass and steel structure that went up in the early 2000s. Nothing special architecturally, just another office tower in a city full of them. The building housed maybe 20 different companies, law firms, consulting agencies, tech startups, insurance companies. During business hours, the elevators were always crowded, the lobby bustling. But after 6 p.m., the place emptied out fast. By 7 or 8, it was usually just security guards and the occasional late worker like me. This was during tax season, mid-April, and I'd been pulling 12-hour days for weeks. On Wednesday the 12th, I was still at my desk at 9 p.m. trying to finish a client's return that was due the next morning. The office was empty except for me. My co-workers had all left by 7:30, eager to get home to their families. I didn't mind being alone. I actually preferred it. No distractions, no interruptions, just me and the numbers. Around 9:15, I heard the elevator ding. Someone getting off on our floor. Not unusual. Other companies probably had people working late too. But then, I heard footsteps in our reception area. Our main door, which locked automatically after business hours, opened. Someone was coming in. "Hello?" I called out from my desk. "We're closed. Can I help you?" No answer. The footsteps continued through the reception area, down the main hallway toward the offices. I got up and walked toward the sound. The hallway was empty. No one there. But I could still hear footsteps, fading now, heading toward the back of our suite. "Is someone there?" I called again. Still no answer. I walked down the hallway, checking offices as I went, all empty. The footsteps had stopped. Everything was silent. I must have been hearing things, sound traveling from another floor, or just the building settling. I went back to my desk and tried to focus on work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the office with me, that I wasn't as alone as I thought. At 9:30, the lights went out. All of them, simultaneously. Complete darkness except for the glow of my computer screen and the city lights coming through the windows. "Seriously?" I muttered, pulling out my phone for a flashlight. Power outage, probably. The building was old enough to have electrical issues. I waited a few minutes for the lights to come back on. When they didn't, I decided to call it a night. I'd been working for 13 hours anyway. The return could wait until morning. I saved my work, shut down my computer, and gathered my things, used my phone's flashlight to navigate to the elevator. Pressed the call button. Nothing. The elevators were out too. Stairs it was, 14 floors down. Not ideal in heels, but manageable. I found the stairwell and started descending. The emergency lights were on, at least, casting everything in that eerie red glow. My footsteps echoed in the concrete space, the sound bouncing off walls. I'd gone down maybe 3 flights when I heard something above me, a door opening, footsteps on the stairs, someone else leaving the building, I assumed. Someone who'd also been working late. But the footsteps were fast, too fast, running down the stairs, taking them multiple at a time, and there were a lot of them. Not one person, multiple people all running, all heading down. An emergency? A fire? But there'd been no alarm, and I didn't smell smoke. I pressed myself against the wall as the footsteps got closer. Louder. More of them now, a stampede of people rushing down the stairwell. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, but no one appeared. The footsteps rushed past my floor, below me now, continuing down. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't see anything except the empty stairs and the red emergency lighting. Dozens of invisible footsteps racing down the stairwell, desperate to get out. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, listening as the sounds faded, continued all the way down to the ground floor. Then silence. What the hell was that? I pulled out my phone and called 911. Explained that I was in the Palmer building, that there might be an emergency, that I'd heard people running but couldn't see them. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to check. Asked if I could get to the ground floor safely. I said yes and continued down the stairs, moving faster now, eager to get out of the building. I reached the ground floor and pushed through the stairwell door into the lobby. It was empty. The security desk was unmanned. The front doors were locked, lights off, except for the emergency exit signs. But the building shouldn't be empty. There was always someone at the security desk. Always. 24 hours a day. That was the whole point of having security. I tried the front doors, locked. I pounded on the glass, looking for anyone outside who might help. The street was quiet, a few cars passing, but no pedestrians. My phone rang. The 911 dispatcher. "Ma'am, officers are en route to your location. Are you safe?" "I'm in the lobby. The doors are locked. I can't get out. And the security guard is gone. There's no one here. Can you stay on the line until officers arrive? Yes, please hurry. I waited by the front doors, phone pressed to my ear, watching the empty street. 5 minutes passed. 10. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking periodic questions to make sure I was okay. Finally, I saw flashing lights. 2 police cars pulled up. Officers got out, approached the building. One tried the door, found it locked, spotted me inside, and gestured for me to unlock it. I tried, but the doors wouldn't budge. Locked from the inside somehow, requiring a key I didn't have. The officer said something I couldn't hear through the glass, pulled out a radio. After a minute, he gestured for me to step back. They were going to break the glass. A sharp impact. The glass spiderwebbed but didn't break. Another impact. This time it shattered, and one of the officers reached through to unlock the door from the inside. I stumbled out into the cold April night, grateful to be outside, away from that empty building. "Are you hurt?" the officer asked. "No. I'm fine, but something's wrong. The building, it's empty. Everyone's gone. Even the security guard." The officers exchanged glances. "Let's check it out. Stay here." They went inside, flashlights drawn. I waited on the sidewalk, watching through the broken glass as they moved through the lobby. After a few minutes, they came back out. "Building's empty," one of them confirmed. "No security guard, no other occupants. Power's out on multiple floors. What were you doing in there?" "Working late. I'm an accountant. I was at my desk on the 14th floor when the lights went out." "You said you heard people running?" "In the stairwell. Footsteps, a lot of them, like dozens of people all running at once, but I couldn't see anyone." The officers looked skeptical. "You might have been hearing echoes. Sound carries weird in stairwells." It wasn't echoes. These were distinct footsteps, multiple people running, desperate to get out. One officer made notes while the other called something in on his radio. After a few minutes, he turned back to me. "We'll file a report. In the meantime, is there someone you can call? Someone to pick you up?" I called my roommate, who arrived 20 minutes later. The police said they'd investigate further, contact the building management, figure out where the security guard had gone. They took my contact information and told me to go home, get some rest. In my roommate's car, driving away from downtown, I looked back at the Palmer Building. Dark against the night sky, empty. All those windows black, no lights in any of them. "What do you think happened?" my roommate asked. "I don't know," I said. But I couldn't shake the memory of those footsteps, the sound of dozens of people running for their lives, invisible, desperate to escape. The next morning, I called my boss to explain why I'd be late. Told him about the power outage, the strange evacuation, the police. He said he'd heard about it. Apparently, several other late workers from different companies had called with similar stories. Everyone agreed something weird had happened around 9:30 p.m., but no one could explain what. Building management said the power outage was due to a transformer failure. The security guard had apparently left his post to check on the problem and hadn't returned. They were investigating that as well. But none of that explained the footsteps, the sound of dozens of people running down the stairs when the building was empty. I went to work that afternoon, still shaken but determined to finish the tax return I'd abandoned the night before. The office was normal, lights on, computers running, co-workers at their desks. Everything as it should be. "Crazy night, huh?" my colleague Mark said. "I heard 3 different companies had people working late. All of them reported the same thing. Lights out, strange sounds, feeling like they needed to get out immediately." "Did anyone else hear the footsteps?" I asked. "Footsteps." Mark looked confused. "I heard the building was evacuated due to the power failure, but I didn't hear anything about footsteps." I checked online, found a brief news article about the Palmer Building incident. Power outage prompts evacuation of downtown office building. The article mentioned the transformer failure, the temporary power loss, and the fact that several late workers had to evacuate via stairwells. Nothing about strange sounds or missing security guards. But I knew what I'd heard, and I wasn't the only one. I found contact info for 2 other people who'd been in the building that night. A lawyer named David from the 18th floor and a marketing consultant named Priya from the 9th floor. I emailed them both, asking if they'd experienced anything unusual beyond the power outage. Both responded within hours. David, I heard something in the stairwell when I was evacuating. Like footsteps above me, people running. But when I looked, no one was there. Thought I was imagining things. Priya. The weirdest thing was how quickly the building emptied. I work late a lot, and there are usually other people around. But that night, after the lights went out, it felt like everyone disappeared instantly. Like the building just voided itself. I suggested we meet. Talk about what happened. Try to understand it. They both agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown the next day. The 3 of us, strangers brought together by a shared experience no one else seemed to believe. I've worked in the Palmer Building for 6 years, David said. Never experienced anything like that. The footsteps, the feeling of panic. It was like the building itself was trying to get everyone out. I felt it too, Priya agreed. This overwhelming urge to leave, like staying would be dangerous. I didn't question it, just grabbed my things and ran. Same, I said. After I heard those footsteps, I couldn't get out fast enough. We compared timelines. All of us had experienced the power outage at 9:30 p.m. All of us had heard unexplained sounds, and all of us had felt that sudden, desperate need to evacuate. What about the security guard? Priya asked. Did they ever find him? I'd followed up on that. No, he's still missing. Building management says he clocked in at 9 p.m. for his shift but never clocked out. His car is still in the parking garage, like he just vanished. David pulled out his laptop. I did some research on the building. Wanted to see if anything like this had happened before. He turned the screen toward us. A news article from 2019. Office building evacuated after fire alarm malfunction. The Palmer Building. A false alarm had triggered a full evacuation during business hours. The article mentioned that over 500 people had evacuated in under 10 minutes. Impressive response time, I said. But how is that relevant? Keep reading, David said. Look at the date. April 12th, 2019. Exactly 4 years before our experience. Same date, same building. Could be a coincidence, Priya said, but she didn't sound convinced. David scrolled down to another article, 2015. Power outage affects downtown office tower. Palmer Building again. April 12th. Same date as our incident, 8 years earlier. Okay, that's weird, I admitted. But maybe April 12th is just an unlucky date for the building. Infrastructure issues, anniversary of some electrical installation. David pulled up another article, 2011. Emergency drill tests building evacuation procedures. Palmer Building, April 12th. 12 years ago. A pattern was emerging. Every 4 years, on April 12th, something happened at the Palmer Building. An evacuation, a power outage, some event that forced people to leave quickly. What happened the first time? Priya asked. What started this pattern? David searched further back, found an article from 2007, April 12th. Tragedy strikes downtown office building. I read over his shoulder. A fire had broken out in the Palmer Building. Started on the 14th floor, my floor, around 9:30 p.m. The building had been mostly empty, just a handful of late workers and security staff. The fire spread quickly. The alarm system malfunctioned. People trapped in the building couldn't get out in time. 17 people died, most on the upper floors, overcome by smoke before they could reach the stairwells. A few in the stairwells themselves, trying to evacuate as the smoke filled the enclosed space, and one security guard stationed at the lobby desk who stayed at his post trying to call for help instead of evacuating. His body was found near the security desk, still holding a phone. "Oh my God," Priya whispered. "That's what we heard. That's what the footsteps were. The people who died trying to evacuate." "Every 4 years," David said. "On the anniversary. They try again. Try to get out. Try to escape the fire that killed them." I thought about that night. The footsteps rushing past me in the stairwell. The desperate speed, the panic. The way the building had felt wrong, dangerous, like staying would be fatal. "And the security guard," I said, "the one who went missing. He was at the lobby desk when the ghost of the original security guard appeared," David finished. "What do you want to bet when we check security footage? If there is any, we'll see our guard leave his post, walk toward the lobby, and then just disappear. Same as the original guard, staying at his post instead of evacuating." We sat in silence, processing the implications. The Palmer Building was haunted, not in some vague, general way, but specifically. A tragedy replaying every 4 years, the victims trying again and again to escape a fire that happened 17 years ago. "We need to tell someone," Priya said. "Building management, the police, someone. People work there. They deserve to know." "Know what?" David asked. "That the building is haunted? That every 4 years ghosts try to evacuate? No one will believe us. They'll think we're crazy." "Then we document it," I said. "We have 4 years until it happens again. We gather evidence, talk to other people who've been in the building on April 12th in past years, build a case, and when 2028 comes around, we make sure no one is in that building after 9 p.m. We all agreed. It was the only thing we could do. Warn people, even if they didn't believe us. Try to prevent anyone else from experiencing what we'd experienced. But I had a feeling documentation wouldn't be enough. That even with evidence, even with multiple witnesses, people would rationalize it away. Call it mass hysteria, acoustic anomalies, anything but the truth. That the Palmer Building remembered its tragedy, and every 4 years, on the anniversary, it tried desperately to correct it, to save the people who'd died, to empty itself fast enough that no one would be trapped this time. But it was always too late. The evacuation was always ghostly, the footsteps always invisible. The living could hear them, feel the urgency, sense the panic, but the dead were running through a building that no longer existed in the same time frame, trying to escape a fire that had burned out years ago. I didn't work late on April 12th ever again. Neither did David or Priya. We spread the word quietly, carefully, to people who worked in the Palmer Building. Some listened. Most didn't. Most thought we were conspiracy theorists or attention seekers. The building management issued a statement after our article attempts were rejected by local news. Said the April 12th, 2023 incident was an isolated power failure. Said the missing security guard had been found safe, suffering from a mental health episode, taking time off. Said there was no pattern, no cause for concern. But I knew the truth. We all did. And when April 12th, 2027 came around, there was another incident. A gas leak that prompted evacuation around 9:30 p.m. 3 late workers reported hearing strange sounds in the stairwells. One reported seeing shadows that looked like people but weren't there. Building management blamed faulty sensors, said the gas leak was a false alarm, said the sounds were echoes and the shadows were tricks of light. The pattern continued. I left Morrison & Associates in 2025, took a job with a different firm in a different building. I couldn't work in the Palmer Building anymore. Couldn't walk through that lobby without thinking about the security guard who'd stayed at his post, about the 17 people who'd died trying to evacuate, about the ghosts that ran through the stairwells every 4 years trying desperately to escape. David moved to a different law firm. Priya went freelance, working from home. We all left. We all got out. But others took our places. New hires who didn't know the history, who worked late without fear, who didn't understand that some buildings hold on to their tragedies, that some dates are cursed, that some evacuations happen outside of normal time, ghosts running through stairwells trying to escape fires that burned out decades ago. The Palmer Building still stands in downtown Minneapolis, 20 stories of glass and steel, home to dozens of companies, hundreds of workers. Most of them have no idea what happened there in 2007. No idea that every 4 years, like clockwork, the building remembers. The building tries to evacuate. The building empties too fast because the dead are running too, invisible and desperate, trying to get out before the smoke overcomes them. And every 4 years, a few late workers experience what I did. Hear the footsteps, feel the panic, sense the urgency. Most evacuate safely. A few don't. They freeze, confused, unsure whether to trust what they're hearing. And occasionally, someone goes missing. A security guard, a janitor, a late worker who stayed at their desk too long. Someone who gets caught up in the ghost evacuation, who follows the invisible footsteps into a building that exists out of phase with reality. Those people sometimes turn up later, confused, disoriented, missing time. They can't explain where they were or what happened. They just know they were in the building, and then they weren't, and now everything is different. The building emptied too fast. That's what they all say. One moment, it was full of people. They could hear them, sense them. And the next moment, it was empty. Like everyone disappeared between one breath and the next. They don't understand that they were experiencing both time frames at once. The present and April 12th, 2007. The building as it is, and the building as it was when 17 people died. Time overlapping, past and present mixing. The dead trying to escape and the living caught in their path. If you work in an office building and you notice a pattern, if strange things happen on the same date every year, if people report unusual experiences, if the building seems to have a memory, pay attention. Don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize it away. Some buildings hold on to their tragedies. Some dates are branded into the architecture itself, burned into the walls and floors and stairwells. And when those dates come around, the building remembers. The building reenacts. The building tries to correct what went wrong, even though it's too late, even though everyone involved is long dead. The Palmer Building empties too fast every 4 years because in 2007 it didn't empty fast enough. 17 people died. And now, on every anniversary, those 17 people run through the stairwells again, trying desperately to reach the exits before the smoke overcomes them. They never make it. They never escape. They're running through a building that exists in multiple time frames at once, trapped in their final moments forever. But they keep trying. Every 4 years, like clockwork, they run. And if you're in the building when it happens, if you work late on April 12th, you'll hear them. You'll feel the panic. You'll sense the urgency. And if you're smart, you'll run too. You'll evacuate along with the ghosts, exit the building before the overlap becomes complete, before past and present merge fully. Because some of the people who stay too long don't come back. They get lost in the time stream, caught between 2007 and now, existing in both moments at once. And when they're found, if they're found, they're never quite the same. They talk about smoke that isn't there, about fire alarms that didn't go off, about stairwells full of people who weren't really there, about the moment they realized they were running alongside the dead, all of them desperate to escape a building that should have emptied faster, should have saved more people, should have prevented the tragedy. The building that emptied too fast is haunted by the memory of the building that emptied too slow. And every 4 years, it tries to make up for its failure, tries to save the people it couldn't save the first time. I don't work in the Palmer Building anymore, but I think about it every April 12th. Think about the workers who are there late, who don't know the history. who don't understand what they're hearing when the footsteps start. I hope they listen. I hope they evacuate. I hope they get out before the building pulls them fully into its memory, before they become part of the pattern, before they join the ghosts running through the stairwells, trying desperately to escape. The building empties too fast. It always empties too fast. Because it's trying to save 17 people who are already dead, trying to correct a tragedy that happened decades ago, trying to rewrite history one evacuation at a time, and every 4 years, it fails. The ghosts run. The living hear them. The building tries desperately to empty itself fast enough. But it's never fast enough. It's never enough. The pattern repeats. The tragedy echoes. The dead keep running. And the building remembers. Always remembers. Forever trying to empty itself faster. To save the people it couldn't save. To correct the past. Even though the past can never be changed. Even though the dead are beyond saving. Even though no evacuation, no matter how fast, can bring back the 17 people who died on April 12th, 2007. The building tries anyway, and every 4 years, the living bear witness to its desperate, impossible attempt at redemption. Story 5, The Cemetery That Rearranged Itself. Groundskeeping at a cemetery isn't the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills and comes with unexpected peace. Most people assume it's depressing, working among the dead. But there's something calming about it. The quiet, the routine, the way each day follows the same predictable pattern. At least that's what I thought before I started working at Greenwood Memorial Cemetery. My name is Tyler, I'm 28, and I took the groundskeeper position last March. The pay was decent for maintenance work, and the hours were regular, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. No evenings, no weekends unless there was a funeral scheduled. The cemetery's director, Mrs. Halloway, seemed nice enough during the interview, a woman in her 60s who'd worked there for 30 years. It's a peaceful place, she told me. Respectful work. You'll be maintaining the grounds, trimming grass around headstones, keeping the pathways clear. Simple tasks. She didn't mention anything unusual. Nothing about the way graves would sometimes be in different locations than they were the day before. Nothing about the paths that didn't always lead to the same places. Nothing about the section of the cemetery that everyone avoided after sunset. I should have asked why the position was vacant. Should have wondered why a groundskeeper job at a small cemetery needed to be filled so urgently. But I needed the work, and I didn't ask questions. My first week was normal. The cemetery was about 20 acres, established in 1847, with sections dating back to the original founding of the town. Victorian monuments in the old section, simpler modern headstones in the newer areas, mature oak trees providing shade, winding paths connecting the different sections. It was, as Mrs. Halloway had promised, peaceful. I learned the layout quickly. The main entrance on Elm Street led to the oldest section, where elaborate Victorian graves stood with angel statues and ornate ironwork. To the west was the 1920s section, Art Deco markers and simple crosses. The east side held graves from the 1950s onward, flat markers set into the ground for easier mowing. And in the far back, separated by a low stone wall, was the oldest section. The original cemetery from 1847, with weathered headstones and sunken graves. Mrs. Halloway told me to focus on the main sections, keep them pristine for visitors. The back section, she said, we maintain quarterly. It's not visited often, and the terrain is difficult. I nodded, happy to have a smaller area to focus on. The main cemetery was beautiful and well maintained. The work was meditative, mowing grass, trimming around stones, raking leaves, clearing debris. I'd put in earbuds and listen to podcasts while I worked, lost in the rhythm of physical labor. On my 8th day, I noticed something odd. There was a grave I'd been working around all week, a simple headstone from the 1960s, marking the grave of Helen Morrison, 1922 to 1968. It was near the west gate, under a large oak tree. I'd trimmed around it 3 times, knew its location well. On Thursday, it wasn't there. The oak tree was there. The general area was the same. But Helen Morrison's grave was gone. In its place was a different marker. Robert Chen, 1945 to 1989. I stood there, confused. Had I been mistaken about the location? But no. I specifically remembered this spot because of the oak tree and its proximity to the west gate. This was definitely where Helen Morrison's grave had been. I checked my phone. I'd taken photos throughout the week for my own reference, documenting my work. I scrolled back to Tuesday. There it was, Helen Morrison's grave, right under the oak tree, exactly where I remembered it. I walked around the cemetery looking for Helen Morrison's grave. Found it 20 minutes later, near the east fence, nowhere near where it had been before. Same headstone, same inscription, same dates, but in a completely different location. Graves don't move. That's not possible. They're permanent fixtures, set in concrete, marking the location of buried remains. Someone would have to excavate, transport the headstone, and install it somewhere else. That would take hours of work, heavy equipment, permits. I told myself I'd been mistaken, that I'd confused this grave with another one, that I simply hadn't noticed it near the east fence before. Memory is fallible. I'd only been working here a week. Easy to get locations mixed up, but I knew what I'd seen. I knew where that grave had been. I didn't mention it to Mrs. Halloway. Didn't want to seem unreliable or confused in my second week on the job. Just made a mental note to pay closer attention to grave locations. The next day, 3 more graves had moved. I was certain this time. I'd photographed specific sections the day before, and now the arrangement was different. Not dramatically. Graves were still in roughly the same area, but they'd shifted, changed positions relative to each other, like someone had played chess with the headstones overnight. This time, I went to Mrs. Halloway, showed her my photos, explained what I'd noticed. She looked at the photos for a long time. Then she closed her office door and sat down heavily in her chair. "I was hoping you wouldn't notice," she said. "Not right away, at least." The last 3 groundskeepers, they noticed within the first month. And they quit, all of them. Said they couldn't work in a place where the dead won't stay put. "So it's real?" I asked. "The graves actually move?" "Not the graves," she corrected. "The markers, the headstones, the graves themselves, the actual burial sites, don't move. It's just the stones. They rearrange themselves." "That's impossible." "And yet," she gestured at my photos, "you've documented it yourself." Helen Morrison's headstone was west on Tuesday, east on Thursday. The actual burial is still in the west section, but the stone has moved. I sat down, trying to process this. Why? How? I don't know why. As for how, she opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. I've been documenting it for years, ever since I started working here. The headstones move at night. No one sees it happen. No cameras have ever caught it on film. But by morning, the arrangement has changed. She spread out papers showing cemetery maps from different dates. The layouts were all different. Graves in different positions, paths running in different directions, sections that seemed to shift and flow like the cemetery was a living thing. "It's been happening since the beginning," she said. "Since 1847. The founders documented it in their journals, called it the restless ground. Said the dead wouldn't stay marked, that the stones moved according to some pattern they couldn't understand. And people just accepted this. What choice did they have? You can't shut down a cemetery. The dead are already buried. Families have plots they've paid for. You just learn to live with it. Learn to accept that the cemetery has its own logic, its own arrangement. But what about visitors? I asked. People coming to visit graves. How do they find their loved ones if the markers keep moving? They ask me, she said. I keep records. I know where every burial actually is. When someone comes looking for a grave, I walk them to the location. They put flowers on the ground if there's no marker present, or on whatever marker happens to be there that day. Most people don't even notice. They're focused on their grief, not on whether the surrounding graves are arranged differently than last time. I looked at the maps, at years of documentation showing a cemetery that refused to stay still. Is it dangerous? Has anyone ever been hurt? Not physically, she said, but psychologically, it affects people. Groundskeepers see it the most because they're here every day, notice the changes. Visitors might sense something is off, but attribute it to memory. But you'll see it constantly. You'll watch the cemetery reorganize itself night after night, and it can be unsettling. Why didn't you tell me during the interview? She looked guilty. Because you would have said no. Everyone says no when I tell them up front. But if they work here for a week first, see that the job itself is good, that the cemetery is beautiful despite its strangeness. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they learn to accept it. I should have quit, should have walked out right then. But I needed the job. And Mrs. Halloway was right. The work itself was good. The pay was fair. And if I could just accept that the cemetery rearranged itself, maybe I could live with it. I'll stay, I said, but I want the truth about everything else. No more surprises. She nodded. Deal. There's one more thing. The old section, the one from 1847. Don't go in there after dark. During the day it's fine, but after sunset, the rearrangement is more active there, more extreme. People have gotten lost, disoriented. One groundskeeper went in at dusk and didn't come out until dawn, said the paths kept changing, that he walked in circles for hours. Lost? In a cemetery that's only 20 acres? Lost, she confirmed, because those 20 acres don't stay the same size at night. Don't stay the same shape. The old section especially, it expands, contracts, changes. During the day, it's fixed, but after dark, it becomes something else. I stayed, kept working, learned to accept the strangeness. Every morning, I'd walk the cemetery and note what had changed overnight. Sometimes just a few headstones had shifted positions. Sometimes entire sections had rearranged. Graves from different eras mixing together. Victorian monuments standing next to modern flat markers. The families never seemed to notice. They'd come to visit, ask Mrs. Halloway to show them to the grave, place their flowers. If they noticed the cemetery looked different than their last visit, they didn't mention it. Maybe they assumed their memory was faulty. Maybe they were too focused on their loss to care about the arrangement of stones. But I noticed. I noticed every change, every shift. Started taking photos every morning, documenting the new layout. Built up my own archive like Mrs. Halloway had, trying to find a pattern. There wasn't one, at least not one I could decipher. The cemetery rearranged itself seemingly at random. Sometimes graves from the same family stayed together. Sometimes they separated, spreading across the grounds. Sometimes historical periods clustered. Sometimes they mixed. The only constant was the old section, the 1847 section, that always stayed separate, divided by the low stone wall. Whatever force was rearranging the cemetery, it kept the original graves isolated from the rest. I stayed out of the old section at first, heeded Mrs. Halloway's warning, but I was curious. What made it so different? What happened there after dark that was more extreme than the rest of the cemetery's nightly rearrangements? 6 weeks into the job, on a Friday afternoon, I finished my work early. It was 2 p.m., an hour before I was supposed to leave. The sun was bright, the day warm. I decided to explore the old section, see what made it so special or so dangerous. I climbed over the low stone wall. The old section was maybe 2 acres, smaller than I'd expected. The graves here were ancient, headstones weathered and tilted, inscriptions barely legible, names from the 1800s. Pioneers, early settlers, people who'd lived and died when this town was barely established. The atmosphere was different here, heavier. The air felt thicker, the light dimmer despite the bright sun. The temperature dropped noticeably, maybe 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the cemetery. And it was quiet. Not peaceful quiet like the main cemetery. Dead quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just silence. I walked among the old graves, reading what I could of the worn inscriptions. Samuel Blackwood, 1809 to 1871. Martha Green, 1815 to 1849. Children's graves, tiny stones marking lives that lasted only months. Family plots where entire bloodlines had been laid to rest. And the arrangement, it was chaotic. Graves from the same family were scattered. Stones faced different directions. There was no order to it, no pattern. Like someone had thrown the headstones randomly, and wherever they landed, they stayed. But during the day, they did stay. I spent an hour walking the old section, and nothing moved. Everything remained exactly where it was. Whatever force caused the rearrangement, it was dormant in daylight. I left the old section at 3 p.m., climbed back over the stone wall, and went home. Everything was fine. On Monday morning, I came back to find the entire cemetery had undergone its most dramatic rearrangement yet. Graves from all different eras were mixed together. Victorian monuments next to 1980s markers next to modern stones. The paths had changed too, running in different directions than they had on Friday. And the old section, I could see from outside the stone wall that the arrangement there had changed dramatically. Graves that had been scattered were now clustered. Stones that had faced south now faced north. The entire 2 acres had reorganized itself over the weekend. I mentioned it to Mrs. Halloway. The old section changed more than I've ever seen it. She looked concerned. You went in there, didn't you? Just for an hour on Friday afternoon, during daylight, like you said was safe. You shouldn't have gone in at all, she said. Even during the day. It's not wise. That section is the heart of whatever's happening here, the source. The more attention you pay to it, the more active it becomes. What do you mean, the source? She pulled out an old journal from her desk, leather-bound, pages yellowed. This belonged to the original groundskeeper, back in 1847. Silas Greenwood, the man the cemetery is named after. He documented what happened. She opened it to a marked page and showed me. The handwriting was old-fashioned, barely legible, but I could make out the words. The dead refuse their places. Move by night. Seek arrangement unknown to living. Ancient pattern, older than town, older than memory. We build atop sacred ground, and the dead below disturb the dead above. Sacred ground? I asked. The original cemetery section, Mrs. Halloway explained, was built on a Native American burial site. The town founders knew this. They documented it. But they built there anyway, said the land was already consecrated for the dead, so it was appropriate. But the Native Americans, they probably had their own arrangements, their own ways of burying people, their own sacred patterns. Exactly, she said. And those patterns, they're still trying to manifest. The cemetery keeps rearranging because there are 2 different orders trying to exist in the same space. The European cemetery above, with its rows and plots and family sections, and the native burial ground below, with its own logic, its own arrangement. And they're fighting, I said. The 2 patterns are in conflict. Or trying to merge, Mrs. Halloway suggested. Trying to find some arrangement that satisfies both. But they never succeed. So the cemetery keeps rearranging, keeps trying, night after night, year after year, for almost 2 centuries. I looked at the old journal entry. Silas Greenwood figured this out in 1847. Why didn't they do something? Move the cemetery, conduct proper reburials, make peace with the land? They tried, she said. According to his later entries, they conducted ceremonies, brought in religious leaders, spiritual advisors, even a native elder who agreed to help. Nothing worked. The rearrangement continued. Eventually, they gave up, decided to just live with it, keep it quiet, maintain the cemetery as best they could, and hope that eventually the two patterns would find harmony. Have they? In 180 years? She shook her head. The rearrangement continues. If anything, it's gotten more active, more frequent, more dramatic. I thought about what she'd said, about how my visit to the old section had triggered the most dramatic rearrangement yet. You said paying attention to it makes it more active. What happens if we stop paying attention? Stop documenting, stop tracking the changes? I don't know, she admitted. I've never tried. Documenting is how I keep track of where burials actually are. Without that, I couldn't help families find their loved ones. But maybe that's the problem, I said. Maybe by documenting, by trying to impose our order, we're perpetuating the conflict. Maybe if we just let the cemetery arrange itself however it wants, without trying to track it or understand it, maybe it would find its pattern naturally. She looked skeptical. Or maybe it would become complete chaos. Maybe the documentation is the only thing keeping it somewhat organized. I couldn't argue with that, but I had a theory, and I wanted to test it. What if I stopped going into the old section entirely? What if we sealed it off, declared it off limits, let it be completely undisturbed? It's already off limits after dark, she pointed out. I mean completely. No visits at all, day or night. No maintenance, no groundskeeping, no human presence. Just leave it alone and see if the activity decreases. She considered this. I suppose we could try. That section doesn't need much maintenance anyway. No mowing, since the grass barely grows there. And no families visit those graves anymore. Everyone buried there has been dead for over a century. No living relatives left. So we seal it off, I said. Put up a fence, make it officially restricted, and we watch. See if the rearrangement in the rest of the cemetery decreases when we stop interfering with the old section. She agreed to try. We spent the next week erecting a proper fence around the old section, replacing the low stone wall with 8-foot chain link. Posted signs. Restricted area, no entry. Made it clear that this section was now off limits to everyone, including staff. The first night after the fence went up, the rest of the cemetery barely changed. Just 2 or 3 headstones shifted position, the smallest rearrangement I'd seen since starting work there. The second night, nothing moved at all. Every single grave stayed exactly where it had been the day before. It worked, Mrs. Halloway said when I showed her the photos. By leaving the old section alone, we've reduced the conflict. The cemetery is finding stability. But she spoke too soon. On the third night, everything changed. I came to work Wednesday morning to find the cemetery had transformed completely. Not just rearranged, transformed. The paths had changed entirely, running in curves and spirals instead of straight lines. The graves were arranged in circles, concentric rings radiating out from the old section at the center. Every headstone had been repositioned, organized according to some pattern I didn't immediately recognize. And the fence we'd erected around the old section, it was gone. Not destroyed or torn down. Just gone. Like it had never existed. Mrs. Halloway was already there when I arrived, standing at the edge of the old section, staring at the new arrangement. It broke through, she said. We tried to contain it, and it broke through. Reorganized everything according to its own logic. I looked at the circular pattern, the way the graves radiated outward. This is the native burial pattern, isn't it? This is how they arranged their dead. She nodded. I think so. The European grid is gone. This is entirely the indigenous pattern now. After 180 years of conflict, it finally won. We walked through the cemetery, marveling at the new arrangement. It was beautiful in its way. The circular pattern created natural gathering spaces. The spiraling paths encouraged contemplation, meditation. The graves weren't separated by era anymore. All time periods mixed together as if acknowledging that death erases temporal boundaries. What do we tell families? I asked. People coming to visit won't be able to find graves anymore. The whole system has changed. We guide them, Mrs. Halloway said. Same as always. But now maybe they'll notice. Maybe they'll see that something fundamental has changed. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time people knew the truth about this place. Over the next few days, families came to visit, and they did notice. They commented on the new arrangement, asked when it had changed, wondered at the circular pattern. Mrs. Halloway told them the truth, a simplified version at least, that the cemetery had been built on sacred ground, that it had been finding its proper arrangement for centuries, and that it had finally settled into a pattern that honored both the original inhabitants and those buried later. Most people accepted this. Some found it meaningful, even beautiful. A few were upset, felt their family plots had been disrupted. But overall, the response was more positive than I'd expected. And the best part, the cemetery stopped rearranging. Every morning, I'd come to work expecting to find changes, but the graves stayed where they were. The pattern had stabilized. After 180 years of nightly rearrangement, the cemetery had found its final form, or so we thought. 3 weeks after the great rearrangement, I noticed something new. The graves weren't moving anymore, but the ground was. Small disturbances, like something settling or shifting beneath the surface. Sinkholes appearing overnight, only inches deep but noticeable. Soil loosening in certain areas. I mentioned it to Mrs. Halloway. She went pale. The graves themselves, they're starting to move now. Not just the markers, the actual burial sites. Is that possible? In this cemetery? Apparently. We watched over the next month as the disturbances continued. Nothing dramatic, just small shifts, subtle changes in the ground level. But the implication was clear. The dead were rearranging themselves physically now, moving to their proper places in the pattern. What do we do? I asked. Nothing, Mrs. Halloway said. We let them settle. We maintain the grounds, keep the surface safe for visitors, but we don't interfere. This is their cemetery now, has been from the beginning. We're just the caretakers. She was right. This was never really our cemetery. We'd imposed our order on it, built our structures and systems on top of sacred ground. And for 180 years, the land had been trying to tell us that, trying to restore its proper pattern. Now it was succeeding, and our job wasn't to fight it or control it. Our job was to bear witness, to maintain the space, to help families connect with their dead, regardless of where the graves happened to be. The disturbances continued for months, then they slowed, then they stopped. By winter, the ground had settled into its new configuration. The circular pattern above ground now matched whatever arrangement existed below. Surface and depth had aligned, past and present had merged. The cemetery was finally at peace. I still work at Greenwood Memorial Cemetery, still maintain the grounds, keep the grass trimmed, clear the paths. But I approach the work differently now, with more humility, more respect. Understanding that I'm caring for something far older than the headstones suggest, something that existed before the town, before the European settlers, before the names carved in marble. The cemetery hasn't rearranged itself in over a year. The graves stay where they are. The patterns remain stable. Families have adjusted to the new arrangement. Some even prefer it. They say it feels more peaceful, more natural than the rigid grid system. Mrs. Halloway retired last month. Before she left, she gave me Silas Greenwood's journal. "You understand now," she said, "what this place really is. You're ready to be the keeper of its history." I've been reading the journal, learning about those early years when the cemetery was first established. Silas understood, even then, that they'd made a mistake, that you couldn't build on sacred ground without consequences, that the dead would not rest until they were arranged according to the proper pattern. He tried to fix it, spent years trying to understand the indigenous burial pattern, trying to reorganize the cemetery to match it. But he failed. The technology and knowledge weren't available. The cultural divide was too great. It took 180 years. It took the cemetery itself, rearranging stone by stone, night by night, slowly imposing its will on the landscape. It took people like Mrs. Halloway documenting and observing without interfering. And it took someone finally having the sense to leave the old section alone, to let the source pattern emerge without human interference. Now the cemetery is whole. The European and indigenous patterns have merged into something new, something that honors both. The dead rest in circles, in spirals, in arrangements that reflect the sacred geometry of the earth itself. But I know it's not over. Not completely. Sometimes, late in the evening when I'm locking up, I'll see small changes. A headstone that's tilted slightly differently than it was that morning. Soil that's been freshly disturbed. Evidence that the cemetery is still alive, still adjusting, still finding its perfect form. And I'm okay with that, because I've learned that cemeteries aren't static places. They're not just repositories for the dead. They're living landscapes, places where past and present interact, where the earth remembers and responds. Greenwood Memorial Cemetery rearranged itself for 180 years, and in doing so, it taught us something important, that the dead have their own wisdom, that sacred ground never forgets its purpose, that some patterns are older and deeper than human understanding. If you visit a cemetery and something feels off, if the arrangement seems strange or the paths don't run quite right, pay attention. Don't assume it's just poor planning or a random chance. Some cemeteries are still finding their proper form, still rearranging according to patterns we don't understand. And if you work at a cemetery, if you're responsible for maintaining the grounds, approach the work with respect. You're not just mowing grass and trimming hedges. You're caring for sacred space. You're witnessing something profound and mysterious. Don't try to impose order where the land is seeking its own arrangement. Don't fight patterns you don't understand. Just maintain what needs maintaining, guide the living to their dead, and trust that the cemetery knows what it's doing, because the dead aren't as passive as we like to think. They have agency, even in death. They remember the proper ways, the sacred arrangements, and given enough time, they'll find their way back to them. The cemetery that rearranged itself taught me that. Taught me humility, patience, and respect. Taught me that my job isn't to control the landscape, but to serve it, to help it become what it's meant to be. Greenwood Memorial is peaceful now. The rearrangement has stopped, or at least slowed to a rhythm so gradual we can't perceive it. The dead rest in their proper places. The living can visit without getting lost. But I know the truth. I know that beneath my feet, beneath the grass and the soil and the marble markers, the earth is alive. The patterns are still shifting, still settling, still seeking perfect harmony. And I'm honored to be the keeper of this place, to maintain it, document it, and bear witness to its slow, steady journey toward wholeness. The cemetery rearranged itself, and in doing so, it rearranged me too, taught me to see death differently, taught me that rest isn't always still, that peace isn't always static, that the dead have their own wisdom about where and how they should lie. I walk the circular paths every morning. I tend the graves, regardless of when they were placed or whose names they bear. I guide families through the spiraling pattern to find their loved ones, and I watch, always watch. for the subtle signs that the cemetery is still adjusting, still finding its way. Because some places are never truly finished. Some patterns take centuries to complete, and some ground is so sacred that it will spend eternity trying to remember and restore what was lost. Greenwood Memorial Cemetery is one of those places, and I'm just grateful to be here, to witness its transformation, to help it become what it was always meant to be, a cemetery that remembers, that honors all its dead, that rearranges itself until every stone, every grave, every soul finds its rightful place in the pattern, forever seeking, forever shifting, forever sacred. The cemetery that rearranged itself finally found its peace, and in doing so, it taught me how to find mine.